dan, dobro jutro. Bomo počasi začeli. Lep pozdrav na konferenci obvladovanja vode v mestih na Ptuju. Moje ime je Maja Simoniti, prihajam z Inštituta za politike prostora in bom danes vodila ta dogodek. Za začetek besedo dajemo županji mesta, ki nas danes gosti, ki nas je navdihnilo pri pripravi te konference z neprijetnim dogodkom, z letošnjimi poplavami v juliju. Prevzele so nas podobe poplavljenega mesta in ni bilo možnosti za drugo izbiro za lokacijo te naše konference, ki je bila že prej usmerjena v vprašanja obvladovanja vode v času podnebnih sprememb. Gospa Nuška Gajšek je povabljena k besedi.
Lep pozdrav, seveda tudi v imenu mestne občine Ptuj, dobrodošli pri nas. Izbrali ste zelo aktualno temo, vsi tisti, ki smo bili prisotni 7.7., ko nas je prizadelo to veliko neurje, vemo, da je ta tema zelo aktualna, ne samo takrat, ko voda pade, ampak predvsem takrat, ko je ni, ker takrat moramo naslavljati te probleme, iskati rešitve in se spopadati s temi izzivi. Zato si jaz od vaše konference, čeprav ne moremo ostati do konca, veliko obetam. Jaz vam želim res dobro razpravo. Želim, da nekako skupaj staknete glave in najdete neke rešitve na vse te izzive, ki nas čakajo. Verjamem, da v prihodnosti bo tega vedno več, čeprav si seveda tega ne želimo. Ampak kakorkoli, jaz vam pa hkrati želim, da se tudi pri nas na Ptuju dobro počutite in da imate lep dan in lepo popoldan. Hvala lepa.
Hvala lepa za spodbudne besede. Sedaj pa prijazno vabim na oder državnega sekretarja Ministrstva za okolje in prostor, Aleša Prijona. Zelo smo veseli, da je z nami. Verjamemo, da je to tudi znak pomena teme, ki jo odpiramo.
Spoštovana gospa županja, spoštovane dame in gospodje, spoštovane kolegice in kolegi, lepo pozdravljeni. Mesto ob vodi ima poseben čar. Voda je pomembna sestavina mestnega oblikovanja, vodne površine v mestih in vodno okolje daje mestom, kot je Ptuj, značaj in identiteto. Neposredno ob vodah pogosto nastajajo najprivlačnejše predele mest. Vode prav tako povezujejo mesto in okolico. Kot del zelene infrastrukture voda prebivalcev omogoča sprostitev in priložnost za rekreacijo, prispeva k njihovemu dobremu počutju in zdravju, krepi stik z naravo ter nasplošno dviguje kakovost bivanja v mestih. Urejanje vodnega in odvodnega sveta v mestih prispeva k izboljšanju mikroklime in zmanjševanju pojava toplotnega toka v mestu, ki pomore boljše kakovosti zraka in služi kot protihrupna zaščita. Voda je ključnega pomena za delovanje naravnih ekosistemov in biotsko raznovrstnost, za kmetijstvo, za oskrbo prebivalstva s pitno vodo, za proizvodnjo električne energije ter za gospodarstvo in turizem. Žal pa voda pogosto predstavlja tudi grožnjo. Posebno pozornost moramo zato nameniti zagotavljanju poplavne varnosti, pa tudi zagotavljanju zadostne in kakovostne oskrbe s pitno in tehnološko vodo. Vodi je treba nameniti posebno pozornost tudi zaradi pričakovanih vplivov podnebnih sprememb. Le te predmesta in tudi druge naselja postavljajo velike izzive. Slovenija je prepoznana kot območje, ker bodo učinki vpliva podnebnih sprememb v prihodnje veliki. Pričakuje se sprememba padavinskih vzorcev, povečanje pojavnosti suš, zmanjševanje višine in trajanja snežne odeje ter pogostejši in daljši vročinski valovi v mestih. Vremenske ujme s padavinami velike intenzitete vplivajo na povečanje števila poplavnih dogodkov ter ogrožajo zdravje in premoženje prebivalcev mest, kakor tudi ostalih prebivalcev. Povzroča škodo v gospodarstvu in v infrastrukturi. O trajnostnem prostorskem razvoju in razvoju mest zato danes ne moremo govoriti drugače, kot v povezavi z blaženjem podnebnih sprememb in prilagajanjem nanje. Mesta so prostori, kjer se soočajo številne interese, številne javne politike in njihovi ukrepi in zato, da so učinkoviti in koristni zahtevajo usklajeno izvajanje. Zaradi vseh naštetih izzivov je nujno bolje medsebojno povezovati različne stroke, kar je tudi namen današnjega dogodka. Povezovanje vodarstva, prostorskega načrtovanja organizma, politike na področju podnebnih sprememb, zdravstva, varovanja pred naravnimi in drugimi nesrečami je nujno za izboljševanje poplavne varnosti mest in priložnost za izboljšanje kakovosti mest, kakovosti bivanja ter kakovosti življenja prebivalcev. Na aktualni izzive prostorskega razvoja se na Ministrstvu za okolje in prostor odzivamo tudi s pripravo nove strategije prostorskega razvoja Slovenije 2050. Osnutek strategije, ki je temeljni strateški dokument za urejanje prostorskega razvoja države, vsebuje vizijo prostorskega razvoja države, dolgoročne cilje in dolgoročni koncept prostorskega razvoja s prednostnimi nalogami in usmeritvami za doseganje posameznih ciljev. Dokument bo javni razpravi po pridobitvi mnenja ustreznosti okoljskega poročila predvidoma že sedaj v novembru. Vabim vas, da se v času javne razprave aktivno udeležite katerega izmed javnih posvetov ter svojimi predlogi in aktivno pripomorete k pripravi predloga strategije. Želimo uspešen delovni dan v tem čudovitem ambientu. Hvala lepa.
Najlepša hvala. Zdaj pa na odr vabim še zadnjega govorca v uvodnem delu. To je našega direktorja Marka Peterlina, ki bo nekaj več povedal o tem, odkot tema in zakaj. Marko.
Hvala lepa, spoštovani državni sekretar, spoštovani gostje. Veseli me, da vas lahko pozdravim tudi v imenu izvajalca današnjega dogodka Inštituta za politike prostora. In zelo smo tudi veseli, da smo danes na Ptuju, kjer smo s tovrstnimi dogodki prvič. Kot smo danes že slišali, je to mesto, ki se je pač pred kratkim moralo soočiti z izzivi obvladovanja vode. Ni ne prvo, ne zadnje in tudi bojim se, da tudi samo se ni soočilo zadnjič s tovrstnim izzivom, kot je že županja nekako omenila. Hkrati je pa Ptuj tudi eno srednje veliko mesto, kakršno so pravzaprav v Sloveniji prevladujoča in ali pa zaznamujejo, majhna in srednja velika mesta zaznamujejo naš urbani sistem in ima s tem tudi vse pogoje za neko visoko kakovost življenja in pravzaprav tudi za obvladovanje upravljanja, ki je gotovo lažje kot v večjih mestih. Obenem pa tudi mesto s precejšnjim potencialom. Zelo nas je recimo razveselilo, da je ZRS Bistra, ki domuje na Ptuju, nedavno prejela najvišjo nagrado Evropske komisije za inovativne projekte, Regiostars, ki je pravzaprav ena, kot da bi primerjavo je dal vodja projekta, kot da bi zmagal pač Ligo prvakov. Skratka, res najvišje možno priznanje, kar le nakazuje na to, da pravzaprav je tukaj en dost visok strokovni potencial za upravljanje. Še bolj nas pa veseli, da je v bistvu bil projekt tudi namenjen ali posvečen hoji, ki je seveda tudi ena od vsakdanjih hoja po vsakdanjih popravkih, za katero na Ptuju res obstojajo dobri pogoji in ki je tudi ena od pomembnih tem z vidika spopadanja oziroma z vidika upravljanja mest in tudi posledično spopadanja s podnebnimi spremembami. Mogoče samo še to, da današnji dogodek poteka v okviru projekta Podpora urbani politiki in izvajanja programa Urbakt. Projekt poteka od začetka 2017 do konca naslednjega leta. Financira pa ga Ministrstvo za okolje in prostor, izvajalci smo pa na inštitutu, našem inštitutu IPO in v sodelovanju z skupnostjo Občin Slovenije. Poleg takih dogodkov, ki pravzaprav omogočajo neko visoko strokovno razpravo in prenos nekih znanj in izkušenj z evropske ravni, zlasti iz okvira programa Urbakt v domače okolje. V okviru tega programa oziroma projekta organiziramo tudi dogodke, ki so namenjeni izmenjavi izkušenj med slovenskimi občinami in pa študijskim ekskurzijam v pretežno bližnjo tujino, kjer se lahko seznanjamo kjer se občine lahko seznanjajo z dobrimi praksami drugih mest. Danes so z nami res zanimivi gostje in pričakujem in upam, da bomo doživeli ne samo odlične predstavitve, ampak tudi dobro razpravo o tej pomembni temi. Hvala lepa.
Hvala lepa. Zdaj pa je že na vrsti prvo naše predavanje. Naš današnji dogodek je naravnan tako, da si bomo privoščili dve predavanji iz tujine, zato da nas popeljeta malo v širše okolje in omogočita širši pogled na domače probleme in razmere, potem pa bodo sledili še domači govorci. Vsi naši predavatelji, ki smo jih povabili k besedi, so nekako rekli, joj, vabite nas, mi smo tako drugačni od vas, naše mesto je večje, naša fizična geografija je drugačna, vendar pa smo hitro prišli do zaključka, da pravzaprav pa so izzivi podobni, ne glede na fizično-geografske razlike, lege in velikosti naselij. Vsa mesta se danes pravzaprav ukvarjajo s podobnimi težavami in tudi ključne rešitve so si pravzaprav kar precej podobne. Naš prvi gost prihaja iz mesta Antwerpen in sicer je to Ronnie van Leeuweren. On je hidroinženir, kot bi rekli, in sicer z dolgoletnimi izkušnjami v privatni svetovalni praksi, zdaj pa zadnja 3 leta prav na prilagajanju podnebnim spremembam na tem velikem projektnem delu občine Antwerpen deluje. In Ronnie, I invite you now to take your place with us and give your presentation.
Okay, good morning. I will continue in English. So thank you to the Mayor of Ptuj, the State Secretary, and people from IPOP for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I'm very glad to be here in this very nice venue. So my name is Ronnie van Leeuweren. I come from Belgium, from the city of Antwerp. And my function there is I'm a project leader on climate adaptation. So together with different stakeholders, it is my job to prepare our city for the changing climate, which will bring more floods, more droughts, and also more heat. In this presentation, I will give you an overview of our adaptation strategy. I will focus on water because that's the topic of this conference. And I will also give some practical examples of what we are already doing. So it will be a combination of plans and of practical examples. One slide about the city of Antwerp. So the city is situated 1,100 kilometers from where we are now. So the black line is Belgium and the magenta line is the city of Antwerp. So we are situated in the north of Belgium at the border with the Netherlands. The blue line you can see here, the blue line is is the Scheldt River, which is also very important for us. So the city of Antwerp is the second largest city in Belgium. Brussels, of course, is the first. We have a total area of 200 square kilometers, a little bit more than 500,000 inhabitants. And the city of Antwerp is famous for its harbor, for its diamonds, and for its fashion. But I will not talk about that today. Today it's about adaptation. So adaptation became a topic in Antwerp when our mayor signed the European Covenant of Mayors Adapt. And that was done in 2014. So from then on, we are working on adaptation in the city of Antwerp. So in our first climate plan, which dates before 2015, there was only mitigation. So when we were updating our climate plan in 2015, we also added a part of adaptation. So I think 75% is on mitigation and 25% is on adaptation. And adaptation at that time was very new for us, so, and the adaptation strategy was defined only within the city of Antwerp. So we didn't go to other stakeholders yet, so this was done only in the city of Antwerp. And we said we have to work on 3 tracks. The first track that we have to work on is scientific research, because we do not know what adaptation means for a city like Antwerp. What will climate change, what will be the effect of climate change in a city? What do we have to be prepared for? So that's our first track. The second track is that we don't want to wait for all this scientific research to be finished, and that we already want to take some adaptation measures into the different plans that are going on into the city, and also in some pilot projects. If a big pilot project is already going on, it's an opportunity to do already some adaptation measures. And then the third track we are working on in the actual adaptation strategy is co-creation. So our climate plan will end next year in 2020, so this year we're again working on an update of our climate plan. I will talk about that in the last slide. And what is new in our new climate plan is that we will do it with all stakeholders. So where the first one was done only within the city, the new one will be done with all stakeholders, because we think co-creation is very important. What I will do now is I will go to these 3 tracks and tell a little bit more about it. So first about the scientific research. In the beginning we did a rainfall study, so we have a lot of rainfall sensors in the city. We measure our own rainfall. Also the region and the federal government measure rainfalls, but it's not accurate enough for a city level. And based on these data of rainfall and radar data, the university did a statistical analysis. And as a result of this statistical analysis, it was said that there will be more intense rainfalls in our city in future, but on the other hand also longer periods of droughts. So this was not very new, because this is already known for the whole of Europe and even for most of the world. But what was interesting is that these intense rainfalls in the city are even higher than outside the city. We can prove this by statistical analysis on our rainfall sensors. The reason why is not really sure, but it is believed that it is because of the heat stress in the city and also because of the pollution, that high rainfall intensities are higher within the city than outside the city. So actually we are confronted with 2 problems in our city. First, our rainfall intensity is higher than outside, and then on top of that the climate change, which says that rainfall intensity will still increase. Another research was on heat stress. So you see here a map of Antwerp of the urban heat island effect. So the urban heat island effect is the difference in temperature during a summer night between the city and outside the city, so the rural area. So we can calculate how much this difference is, and on an average summer night, this difference is 4 degrees. So in the city, it is 4 degrees warmer at night than outside the city, and at very high summer days, it can be up to 9 degrees. And this is a problem. So this year we broke a record. We reached more than 42 degrees in Belgium. And this is becoming a problem because vulnerable people suffer from this, so it's a health issue. And again, you see the city is confronted with two problems. First, that the problem is bigger in the city than outside the city, and again, on top of that, that climate change will make it even worse. We did some big flood studies, so our sewer system has been hydraulically modeled with 1D, 2D models. So we model the flow in the sewer system, but also when water comes out of the sewer system. So in that way we can have flood maps. What you see here on the left is a flood map of the actual situation, the actual climate. So it's only on the city center that the map is shown. So there are some, this is the T20, so the floods that occur averagely every 20 years. So there are some flood areas in our city. We know them because also the fire brigade knows them, so our model is okay. But what we see that due to climate change, and that's the picture on the right of it, that these floods will increase very much if we don't do anything, of course. And that not only the existing flood areas will increase, but that new flood areas will be created. And then a last scientific research that we are working on in our city is on drought and water scarcity. So the last 3 summers were very dry in Belgium, so this topic is put very high on the political agenda. For the moment, the only thing we can see about drought in our city is our city ponds, in which the water is very low and some of the city ponds are dry. So citizens are complaining, we're walking in the park and there's no water in the park. So that's the only visible problem that we see now, but underlying there are also a lot of invisible problems related to these droughts. So the city green, which is deteriorating, also stability of buildings that is threatened. So in this study we want to have more insight of what drought really means for a city. And water scarcity is the lack of water. So 98% of the water that we use is drinking water. And because of the droughts, this drinking water is becoming very scarce. So in this study we also have to investigate what we can do by using alternative water sources. So this is the first track of our adaptation strategy. We want to have insight into the problem. We want to know what we are talking about. The second track is that we already want to include adaptation measures into plans. And one of the important plans that we have made during the last years is our water plan. So the water plan is a spatial vision of the city on how to treat water in our city. And it's about pluvial water, so the water that falls into the city. So it's not about floods of the Scheldt River. So in the analysis of the water plan, we saw that if you look at Antwerp as a water city, actually you can define 3 kinds of water cities. There is an artificial water city with sewer systems. There is an historic water city because water was very important in the past. And there is the natural water city. So there are rivers, flood areas, and so on. So some pictures, the historic water city. So this was a canal that used to be there until mid-last century, and that brought water from outside into the city where it could be used by citizens and also by the breweries. And this is the same spot today. So 100 years later, so the canal has disappeared because drinking water is now brought into town just via pipes. And it has become a road like so many open areas. This is another example. These were 3 docks in the south of Antwerp. The first harbour was in the south. When the harbour moved to the north of Antwerp, these 3 docks were filled. And this is how this same place looks today. So it's the biggest square of Antwerp. It's 9 hectares big. But as you can see, it's mostly used as a parking space. So cars have become a very important thing in our city. These are just two examples. I can give tens of examples of rivers who have been moved out of our city center because people found them annoying at that time. So this is the historic city. We know that water has been very important, is part of our identity, and if we want to give back the identity to our city, we think we have to bring these historic water elements back into time. Of course, not all elements, you don't have to bring them back just to bring them back, because from a historical point of view, but if they can also have a use for our adaptation strategy, it can be an important thing to do. We also have the natural water cities, so we still have some rivers. Unfortunately, they are moved in the outer skirts of our city, so not anymore in the city center. And there are some areas where water is coming out of the ground or is infiltrating into the ground. And then there is the artificial water city with huge underground sewer systems and very, very large pumping stations. Most of the water is pumped into the Scheldt River. There's almost no gravitational flow. So what is the vision of our water plan? So we have these three water cities. We see that today we are mostly in the artificial water city. But this is becoming a problem because due of climate change, because of the more intense rainfall, this artificial water city is reaching its limits. We cannot make the sewer systems even bigger. We cannot make the pumping stations bigger. This is economically and ecologically not viable. So within our water plan, we want to move from the artificial water city into the historic and the natural water city. And this means that we have to bring water again above ground. So now it's underground, and we have to bring it above ground. And how can you do that? Because if you bring it above ground, you need space. And space is limited in a city, and there is a huge claim on this space. People want recreation, want to park their cars, want to build houses, and want to make money. So, which space can we use? To investigate that, we have divided our city into 11 urban typologies. So, at the right side, you can see each color in the city is symbolizing a different urban typology, and on the left side you can see a symbol of this urban typology. A first look on how it looks like. So this urban typology were defined on how the city looks like from an urban point of view. So if the streets are wide or if the streets are narrow, how many houses are there? Are the houses high or low? Are the houses in a row, or are these more apartments, and so on? So based on all these characteristics, you can define 11 of these typologies. You can imagine that our very old city center has a very different look from the outer areas of our city, which have a more urban, more rural look. So this is an example of one of these urban typologies. It's the late 19th century area of our city, where we see that there is a lot of private property. Almost 80% is privately owned, 20% is publicly owned. And as you can see in the image on the right bottom side, you have these building blocks with some green areas within the building blocks, which are privately owned. So we still have some space there to have some green and blue measures over there. This is the second one of these urban typologies. It's on the left bank of our city, which is a fairly new part of the city from after World War II. So here you see that the public area is much bigger. There's still much space, green space in public area. Private area is concentrated in large building blocks. So in our water plan, we have defined these 11 urban typologies, and on the other hand, we have defined more than 50 what we call water-sensitive building blocks. And water-sensitive building blocks are adaptation measures that you can apply. For instance, a swale or a gutter in your street, or a green roof, or an irrigation recreation area. So these are all water-sensitive building blocks, and we have matched those two. So where there is a large public area, we can have more gutters or rivers into the streets. Where the public area is less big, we have to find other solutions. So in fact, our water plan is a matching of those two things, the urban typologies and the water-sensitive building blocks. These water-sensitive building blocks, they are measures at the source, so they keep to try the water where it falls and to reuse the water where it falls. But on the other hand, we see that at very high rainfall intensities, and this can also occur, that even with all these measures at the source, water is still running off in the streets and going to the lowest places in our city. So that's why, beside these water-sensitive building blocks, we have also defined 5 big water structures. So these are very huge water structures that can store a lot of water. So the most important, of course, is the river that we still have. This is Antwerp, and here you see the city center. And as you can see, the city center is here, sorry. As you can see, there are no rivers anymore in our city center, but in the outer areas we can still use these rivers. So the idea is to widen these rivers, to have floodplains there, to store more water over there. But in the city center we don't have rivers anymore. So there we are looking at a new big blue-green building block, which is called the Ring Park. So there is a ringway around the city of Antwerp, which is situated here, which is the ringway. And there is still some green area along this ringway. So our idea is to have a big blue-green infrastructure all along this ringway and create a kind of new river there where we can bring water to. So this is about the plans, then about the pilot projects. As I said in the beginning, we don't wait for all these plans and scientific research to be finished to do already something anti-rain. So we have some different pilot projects in the city where we learn, where we can experiment. And I will talk about 3 of them. The first one is the Zuiderdok, or the South Docks, the Ringway, and a garden street. So the South Docks, I already showed you this picture. So this is the biggest square that used to be 3 docks. And the city wanted to renew this square, and we put the square on the maps that we have made during our scientific research. So the square is indicated here by the black rectangle. So on the left map that shows the flooding in our city, you can see that the square is not in a flood area, but it's very close to a flood area. To the southeast side there is a very important flood area. So it will be very interesting to store that water in our square. And we can also see that if we look at the urban heat island effect, that the square, even though it's very close to the Scheldt River, is also very prone to urban heat stress. So that's why when we made a project definition for the contest for architects, that we have put adaptation very high in this project definition. So it was a very important boundary condition for our architects. And then we were not surprised, so 5 architects participated with the contest. And although we didn't say in our project definition that it had to be a park, that all 5 architects came with a plan of a park. And this is a picture of the winning design. So this is the map of the square. So what the architect did, he created 3 big green areas. These 3 big green areas, and they represent the 3 docks that used to be there. So there is a reference to the water that was there. It was not useful to really create 3 docks again there, because then you would lose a lot of public domain. These 3 tables, as we call it, are very green, so a lot of new trees are planted. And within this green area, we have a lot of water elements. So the first one are rain gardens and water playgrounds. These are very small, but they are very important. Yeah, I can show that on the next slide. And in the middle you have swales and a lower lawn. So in the middle there is a lawn where people can go and rest. But this lawn is 30 centimeters lower than the surrounding area. So when there is a very high intensity, we can store water over there. So these are some pictures of how this looks like. So the rain gardens and the water playgrounds, as you can see in the upper right, they're not so big. You can store 180 cubic meters over there. So if you look at it from a volume point of view, it's not so important. But we still wanted them because at every rainfall, water is fluctuating over there. So if you look at awareness and education, these are very important measures. The measures that you have at the bottom, so the swales, underground storage, and this lowered meadow, they have much huger volumes, so they can store a lot, but water will not fluctuate there on a daily basis. This lowered meadow, that is an idea that we took from Rotterdam. They have the Bentham plan, which is a playing ground, but it's a hard square. So we actually did the same, but then with a green area instead of a hard area. So with this water elements and with this green infrastructure, we have found a solution for the heat stress and for the flood problem. But then there was still the problem of water scarcity. So what we will also be doing is we will make a collective water reservoir underneath the square. So the city of Antwerp obliges every new building to have an individual rainwater reservoir and to reuse this water. But of course, there are many old buildings that don't have it yet, and it's very difficult to still make them individually. So that's why we had the idea, if we're going to make a new square anyhow, we can make a huge collective reservoir in it. And the idea of this reservoir is that it will take the water from all the roofs of all the buildings surrounding the square, collect it in one big buffer, and then we can use this water for irrigating the trees, for washing our trucks. And then we saw that we still had enough water, and we were thinking, what are we going to do with that? And then our drinking water provider, Waterlink, said, okay, maybe we have to test here the possibility to transform rainwater into drinking water. So they are building that now, and this drinking water will be delivered to a new building that will be built very shortly. This was a crazy idea maybe, so that's why we also did a feasibility study. Is this feasible? First we did a kind of hydraulic study to compare the demand and the water supply. So the demand of the sweeping cars, the irrigation of the trees, and then the drinking water in a new building, and the supply basically is the 2.7 hectares roof area that you have. And if you calculate this on very long time series with wet winters and dry summers, you can see at what period you have enough water and how this goes. We also, I don't have a slide about that, just to be short a little bit, but we also did a cost-benefit analysis, and it was, for the first project, it was beneficial, so the ratio was okay. That's why I decided to go on with this. Second pilot project is on the Ringway. So I already talked that I already said that we want to create a new big blue-green infrastructure along the ring. So this is the actual ring, and you see there is some green area around it. So we already started there with the first trial. So on the picture you can see the first pond that we have excavated there. And what we will test there is we will do a test on water quality, because in the water plan we want to bring more water above ground, where it is now in the sewer system. But then water quality becomes very important. If it's in the sewer system, no one can touch it, so it's not a problem. If you bring it above ground, the water has to have a certain quality. The water that will be stored here will be water that runs off from the road, from a road that has a very huge traffic on it. So, according to our regional legislation, it is not wastewater, so it should be clean water, but we think we should treat it as wastewater because it can be polluted with heavy metals, PCBs and so on. And if you want to reuse it, or if you want children to play in it, you have to be sure that it is clean. So here we will test bioretention systems, we will measure before and after, and if this is going well, we will do the same for all the other buffer areas and blue infrastructure that we will create along the ring. Then a third pilot project is on a much smaller scale. It's on the scale of a street, and it is what we call garden streets. So we have selected some streets into our city that we want to make more green and more blue. So these are normal, excuse me, these are normal adaptation measures. But what is very interesting here is that we did this in full co-creation with all the citizens who are living there. So the citizens are involved from the very beginning to the very end. So in the very beginning we told them what we were planning to do, and they were able to write on notes how they look at their street, what they want in their street, what they don't want in their street. In the second picture you see that they could even make some small designs. They used play tools to do it, so they made themselves designs of their streets. And in the third picture you can see that they also did some temporary things in the street. So they made some temporary green elements in the street to already have some experience with how it would look like in the final situation. So that about our pilot strategies, pilot projects. Then co-creation, the third important track from our adaptation strategy. So the garden streets were already a nice example of what we do in co-creation within our city. So we think that adaptation measures and co-creation should go together. And co-creation, I have to admit, is also new for us as a city. So we know already a lot about it, but we still have to learn more. And that's why we as a city are very keen to work with other European cities to learn from each other, to inspire each other. And one of the projects I want to talk about that we are in is the Sponge project, which is a European project on co-creation for adaptation measures. So this is an interactive cities model project, so we work together with cities from the Netherlands, from the UK, Rotterdam is there, Leiden is there, and it's very interesting to see how they are dealing with stuff, and you can really learn from each other. And the idea of this Sponge project is to show that climate adaptation is not only a challenge technologically, because adaptation is also from a technological point of view quite new, but that it's also a challenge when engaging people. I would like to show you this web page, or the link to the web page, because everything we learned during that Sponge project we have put on the web page. The website that we have put on already existed before. It's called Urban Green Blue Grids. So it's a website which is in Dutch, but also in English, so bilingual. And what you could find there in the past are a technological guide of all adaptation measures. So this was already there. And what we did in the Sponge project, we added a web page, what we call the Sponge Toolbox, with all the co-creation methods. If you click on that, you see the 5 steps in co-creating, going from identifying stakeholders in the beginning to a fully agreement with stakeholders, to build and maintain adaptation measures. And if you click on each of these steps, you can find a list of engagement methodologies that can be used. And if you click there, you find a theoretical background on this methodology, but also some practical examples of how it has been used for different adaptation measures. It gives also a list of stakeholders that can be involved: citizens, companies, government, housing corporations, and so on. And also first impression of how you can engage all of these different types of stakeholders. And there's also a list of pilot projects that we are working on and that we have done in co-creation. Just wanted to give a small overview of this because I think it can be interesting also for other cities. And then this is the last slide. As I said in the beginning, today we are updating our climate plan, and the first time we did it only within the city departments, but now we are doing it in full co-creation. Like also the adaptation measures, we think we have to make our climate plan in co-creation, because we do not only want to have a plan, but also a community that together carries out the actions of this plan. So this is just a big overview of all the stakeholders that we involve in creating our plan. Of course, the neighbors, citizens organizations, civil society, but also financial institutions we think are very important because they pay sometimes for the damage of floods. So maybe we can involve them already in taking measures that floods do not occur, so maybe they can spend their money on another way. Also, a lot of entrepreneurs are there, the harbor, of course, a lot of companies that have flood problems, but also a lot of companies that use water to make milk or other nutrition. Also building companies, which are very important. They make large building blocks in Antwerp, so we want to involve them from the very beginning in our plan. Knowledge institutions, our different city departments, and last but not least, the climate youth, which give us a fresh insight in how we can deal with these adaptation measures. So we hope to have a new adaptation strategy ready by the beginning of next year. And as I said then, our climate plan adaptation will be 50% of our total plan. So this was a very quick overview because a lot more is going on. I have understood that there will be time for questions later. Okay. So thank you.
Časa za vprašanja in razpravo bo kar precej, pa vendar, če bi kdo na hitro kakšno vprašanje postavil, imate priložnost, dajte priložnost, kar izvolite. Prosim, če se lahko predstavite, tako da bomo lahko šli. Ja.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. A swale. A swale is a buffer in the ground. In Dutch we call it wadi, maybe that's a name that is used here. It's a buffer in the ground where you can also infiltrate the water. Yeah.
Ronnie, if you allow, we will take the questions later and make some debate with you. But now we are going to present our second guest presentation. Thank you. This is the presentation from Dr. Giovanni Fini. He was supposed to come from Bologna. Sadly, he's not able to be with us today. We are really sorry. And apologize in his name, but his health didn't allow him to travel, and he only on Monday was able to report this to us. But we would have the presentation. He was able to do the presentation for us, and later on we'll also have the discussion. Se pravičujem, sem kar prišla na angliščino, ker sem govorila z Ronijem. Gospod Giovanni Fini iz Bolonje se nam je žal v ponedeljek moral upravičiti. Zdravniki so mu svetovali potovanje in nam je pa vseeno poslal predavanje in ga bomo pokazali. Zdaj pa mogoče trenutek preden to predavanje postavimo samo, naj povem, da ko smo zbirali naše goste, smo se zavedali teh razlik, no, sem skušala že v vodu povedati, in pa vendar se mi zdi, da ste mogoče že iz predavanja za Antwerpna lahko ujeli, da se da potegniti neke usporednice in da se da najti pravzaprav, bom rekla, vzgibe za to, da lahko tudi pri nas začnemo ukrepati, tako da se bomo bolj učinkovito spopadli s težavami, ki nam jih povzročajo vode v naših naseljih. Urbana, da mogoče dodatne.
Really sorry for that. I'm really sorry because I know how big is the effort that the organizers has put in setting up this great event, and I think it really deserves a success. So sorry for not being there. I will try to be as much effective as possible through this video, and my presentation is about the water governance in the context of climate adaptation, bringing the case of the city of Bologna. I have some key words to share with you in order to make explicit what I want to communicate with my presentation. And the 4 keywords are about innovation. We have to provide new tools to deal with the new problems that climate change is bringing to us. Infrastructures. It is necessary to reorganize, reshape our infrastructures or not. It's an open question. Sorry. Governance is another issue. Actually, we have to be effective in dealing with climate change's problems, and this effectiveness comes from a way of working together that takes into account the relationship between different actors. It is not effective to work alone. It is not possible to solve the problems in this way. And the last element is about the cooperation. International cooperation, especially, is an opportunity that is to be used, especially by local authorities. Let's come to Bologna. Bologna is a city in the northern part of Italy. As you may know, it's almost 1 million of inhabitants, if you consider the metropolitan area, but if you consider the municipality, which is where I work, the central part of the city, it's about 400,000 inhabitants. And its economy is based on the mechanical industry, on the production of food, and on the university, which is very big, almost 100,000 students. This is a wonderful picture of the city center. The city center is a very big city center, and as you can see, the southern part of the city is occupied by the hills that starts the Apennine mountain, while the rest of the territory is absolutely flat, because it's the valley of the Po River. And this territory has been agriculture since the Roman period, so it is not anymore a natural territory since at least 2,000 years. It's a totally anthropized territory, while the south part is the hills area, is a different asset. We have a relationship with climate because the importance of the agri-food production that characterizes the city. Bologna, the term Bologna possibly comes from Latin words which means wealth, good things. The relationship with climate is important for the quality of the production of food, as well as the relationship of climate is important for the quality of water We are not so much aware that, of the importance of water in our historical cities. And if you walk through Bologna, you will see no water at all. And you won't perceive that in reality in the city there is a very intricate network of channels that go to the cities. In the Middle East, those channels were used even for providing energy for moving the big wooden machine that produced silk. Bologna in the 14th century was one of the main centers for the production of silks in Europe, just before this production moved to the Netherlands. Under Bologna, even small torrents are passing and are covered since the Middle Ages. That's because the city of Bologna has been historically built far from the two rivers, Reno and Savena, in order to avoid the risk of floods coming from those two rivers. So the rivers are far and the water is brought by artificial channels. In the southern part, I mentioned the presence of the hills, and this means the presence of very small little torrents that bring water to the sea. Climate changes. The effect of climate changes, as you may know, is to emphasize, to make more frequent and more intense problems that were already present before the climate change started, like the case of slopes in the hills, or the case of floods for the rain. Floods has always happened, obviously. But what now we are experiencing is that those floods are every year more intense and more frequent. In past decades, we expected 1-2 floods as an average for a year. In the last years, we have experienced up to 6-7 floods in the same winter period. So it's a very big change that stresses and present a risk for the infrastructures like this bridge. But what is even more interesting is that climate changes have brought us even new risks, new hazards. This is, for example, one of the small torrents I showed before that comes down from the hill. And those torrents have really never been considered a risk because they're really actually very small. But now the possibility of a very intense concentrated rain in the small valley of this torrent, now this possibility is present. And so we are starting considering the risk of a flood coming from these small torrents. Some floods have already happened, like those in this picture, but they really made some small damages. But what if a more intense rain occurs? In order to prevent this risk, we prepared an adaptation plan, and the work, which is one of the few adaptation plans made in Italy, and the work for this adaptation plan started in year 2012, financed by a European LIFE project called Blue AP. The partners of this project were the City of Bologna, obviously, the Regional Authority for Environment, ARPAI, and the two private companies in charge for communication and for the technical part of preparing the plan. The plan is focused on three main vulnerabilities that came out from the climate analysis done by ARPAI. Those three main vulnerabilities deal with extreme rainfall events, we have already spoken of it, with water scarcity, the amount of water we have available during summer especially, which is really decreasing in the last years and put at risk the agricultural production that need a lot of water, especially in July. And the heat waves, which is the sanitary impact of climate changes. I skip this one. For any of those vulnerabilities, we have set a list of strategies and a list of actions that I won't go through now, obviously, and a list of objectives, and any of those objectives is measured by indicators. In this way, we can keep the plan monitored and see if we are achieving the results we wanted to achieve, or if not, if the plan is to be changed, updated, or anything else. And I will just have a quick look to the vulnerability dealing with extreme rain events and hydrogeological risk. In this case, the main strategy is about improving the hydrogeological response of the city, which basically means decreasing the sealed areas of the city, the areas that are not permeable to water. In new settlements, it means that we have to plan settlements with less sealed areas. But the main effort is to de-seal the existing city. So to invest on public spaces in order to get more green areas and to help to incentive private owners so that they will de-seal their own private properties when intervening in buildings. On the other side, we have to work very much in having a resistant infrastructure, so increasing the resilience of infrastructure, this is an example of a bridge, and having an adequate maintenance of the cultural heritage, because we have seen that historical buildings need an additional level of maintenance in order to avoid damages from extreme rain events. The plan has been approved in 2015, and after that we have started implementing it. I will show you some examples. The first of them is about, again, one of those torrents, the torrent called Ravone. So you see it's just 6 kilometers long, a very small area. But if a very intense rain occurs, then a flood will arrive in minutes. And this is a problem that was never faced because we are organized to manage floods that arrive in hours, not in minutes. So how can we forecast this flood and send the alarm to people? One of the technologies that were developed in the project deal with the reduction of the microwave signal that is used for phone transmission, for mobile phone transmission. If we have the data from the mobile phone company, then we can measure, then we can see when this signal is reduced, the intensity of rain event. So in this way, we can have a very detailed monitoring of rain events in the territory using existing antennas instead of new instruments that can be distributed but have a cost of realization, maintenance, and so on. So what do I want to say? I want to say that we faced a new problem, intense rain events on a small valley and the risk of floods, and we faced this problem by developing a new technology. This was what I meant with innovation. I will show an example of the infrastructure issue, and this is the work we've done with the European Investment Bank, which is very keen of working with cities, especially on the issues of climate change and adaptation. It's a field they're really committed on. And we've done some feasibility studies with the European Investment Banks concerning this area called Lazaretto, which is a new development area in the city. The project of Lazaretto is rather old, some 30 years old, so the project was done when no concern about climate change was present. But the development is being done right now, so we are developing an area with an old project. And the feasibility studies show the possibility of changing the way of managing water in this area. The first scenario that was developed foresaw the collection of rainwater and the storage of the water in ponds in the green areas around the development, in order to reuse it instead of putting it directly into the river when the maximum of rain is present. So it is a way even for reducing, obviously, the hydrogeological risk. While the second scenario deals with the possibility of collecting and treating rainwater, which means the water coming from baths and showers, just to give an example. So water which is in principle dirty in some way, to some extent. And the way for treating the water may even foresee the use of natural solution. So in this case, we have to treat in a natural way a big part of the green areas around the road, which is quite challenging actually. The performance of the second scenario, the so-called alternative 2, is much better, obviously. But what is seen is that this scenario maybe is lacking of social acceptability, so it really cannot be used. But what is interesting, in the previous slide, is that both scenarios have an extra cost, which is not so big if we consider the overall cost of urbanization of the area. So, new infrastructure are to be designed for the city. Existing drainage system is no more effective. We experience it in Bologna, and possibly I think that you are experiencing it as well. Now I'm showing you some more examples. This is about governance and about the possibility of establishing a public-private partnership, which means that the private sector engages itself and becomes a partner in some of the objective of the public sector. This project called the Gaia, it's another life project, and it finished many years ago in 2013, but it's still going on because it was really effective. And the idea was we prepare a partnership where the private that wants to compensate some CO2 emissions pays for trees to be planted as additional trees in a parking area, in a park of the city, or to be planted in an area dedicated to urban reforestation. And this led to an additional amount of at least 2,000 trees in the city, which is good success. But what is even more important is the commitment, the engagement of private companies that feel the importance of contributing to the policies of resilience of the city. This is not a project about water, by the way, obviously, but it deals with climate changes in general. The project was so effective that we extended it to single citizens with this crowdfunding called Radici, which means roads in English. And another crowdfunding for the greening of a public space that is just finished, and it was a very successful initiative. Another example of governance is this way of working that in Italy we call contratto di fiume, river contract in English, which is a process where different actors that have some competencies or interest on the river do work together at a single table. And this may prove, if actors are committed, obviously, to be a really effective approach, bringing together the competencies and the skills, and bringing to behaviors that are not the way that has always been done until now, but new ways of behaving and new approaches and new projects. And I think that it is a really promising way of achieving results. No protagonism, but only the desire of solving the problem. I will end my presentation with two examples of international cooperation. The first one is the URBACT. I think it's very important to mention it because it's a European program which is designed to support the development of cities by financing not specific projects but financing the networks in cities, training activities and the creation of knowledge platforms. It's important because in our experiences, exchanging among cities is really effective because you can get good suggestions by experts, but experts don't have the same feeling of the problem as you have, while in other colleagues city, they do feel the problem in the same way you do, and they do understand your difficulties or your opportunities and so on. So we have had mutual exchanges with other cities in which we have learned a lot, and it's very interesting because they learned in turn themselves, and after years they told us, oh, we have put in place your project and now it's working, we are so happy, thank you so much. So it's really has been a great experience, and I encourage the fact of the opportunity of exchanges among cities. Within the URBACT, there was an initiative about defining some good practices, and Blue AP, the project with which we did our adaptation plan, is one of those good practices. So we are very happy of that. Another experience I'm mentioning is the urban agenda for the European Union, and this is really a pilot, experimental experience that is being carried on since 2016, when the Flemish presidency of Europe promoted the Treaty of Amsterdam and said that the many policies have a human dimension. So those policies cannot be treated only by the national levels, but need an involvement of cities. So the idea was to establish a 12 partnership where different different actors, namely cities, national governments, and European authorities and other European stakeholders. Different actors work together. The idea is that each partner is supposed to prepare an action plan and to implement the plan in a 2 years period. The city of Bologna is coordinating with the government of Poland the partnership about sustainable land use and natural waste solution, so only partly connected to the theme of this conference. But nevertheless, I would like to mention the fact that in the partnership, the Slovenian government, the Ministry of Environment actually, is present and is really giving very strong and effective support to the contents of our work. So it's a pleasure to have them on board. In general, as you can see, the partnership is very composed, and it was great to see. This is the list of the actions of the action plan. It was great to see that even if partners were coming from different parts of Europe and from different level of government and so on, there was a common understanding of the problems. And setting up the actions was, from a certain point of view, easier than I thought, because there were really common feelings about what was going on. So my experience is that this way of working is really promising, and I hope that it will be promoted in the next years in Europe in order to go out of the experimental phase we are now in and to make it a common way of working. So that's all. Again, really thank you for the opportunity of being virtually here. I will go again through the 4 words. Again, innovation. We need new tools. It may be technologies or new legislation, but there is a change that has to be done. We have to innovate. We can survive if we don't. I think that cities should really think about infrastructures. It's not only a matter of maintenance of existing infrastructure. In some cases, maybe yes, but in other, maybe there is a big investment to be done on some infrastructures. There are some structural changes that have to be done in order to be resilient and secure. Governance is a matter of finding an effective way of working together and to involve as many actors as possible. What we are sure is that if we work alone, we won't succeed. And cooperation, again, international cooperation is an opportunity, as well as the interinstitutional cooperation among different levels of government is a great opportunity. It's not easy to participate in European initiatives. It's a big effort, but it's paying the cost. So thank you very much. Good luck for the work of today, and hope to see you soon.